how impressive Indiana was in their home opener despite the loss, because everybody just kind of writes this team off because of the Indiana because of Indiana missing Tyrese Haliburton. And that's an understanding feeling to know that, like, when you're missing a guy that's an all NBA caliber player at the point guard position, when you're missing somebody who really is the representation of what your offense is all about, which is pace, running in transition, pushing the ball up, hitting guys ahead in transition, creating easy offense by having a lot of movement in the half court. Tyrese Halliburton is the walking embodiment of what Rick Carlisle wants to do offensively. But the philosophy itself that Rick has instilled in this team, it's one that still translates with the talent that they have. And you look at what they were able to do from a point distribution standpoint here. 36 points from Bennedict Mathurin. Everybody believes that he's going to be like most improved player of the year caliber. And game one set the tone that, like, he's a guy that with this new responsibility to have so much more time on the ball, he's going to be special. Pascal Siakam, 32 and 15, hit a couple of big shots throughout this game. And they just got so much work from their bench. So much work from their bench. 48 points between Ben Shepherd, Obi Toppin, and Jarris Walker. Shout out to Jarris Walker, by the way. A guy who just continuously seems like he was discouraged and frustrated with his role in this on this organization the last few years. It just seemed like he really couldn't find his fitting. He was drafted top 10, and they bring in Obi. He barely plays. They bring in Obi Toppin to almost like kind of play over top of him. And you kind of ask yourself, like, is this guy going to get any kind of real burn to show why he was regarded as one of the top forwards coming out of University of Houston that year? And we just never got to see it. And this year, Rick Carlisle kind of dusted him off. Game one, dusted him off and said, like, okay, young man, show us what you got. Show us what you got. And he played well. 30 minutes, 13 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Didn't hit the three ball at a high enough clip for my personal liking, as a guy that I know has real potential to shoot the three ball at that power forward position. But I'm glad that he was not afraid to take them. Obi Toppin, 20 points off the bench. I mean, the man missed all 8 of his threes. He hits one or two of them things, and maybe this game goes differently, right? And Ben Shepherd, 39 minutes off the bench, 15 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. And I think he was big time. He was big time because the Andrew Nembhard thing, obviously that's a work in progress. I felt like Andrew Nembhard is somebody that I feel like a lot of people view as this like starting point guard in the NBA, that like if he weren't playing behind Tyrese Haliburton, he would be so much better and blah, 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 blah. And I don't necessarily buy it. I think Ben Mathurin is more likely to take like this crazy jump because of the Tyrese Haliburton absence than Andrew Nembhard. I actually think that Tyrese Haliburton's absence is going to expose really how much of a backup guard Andrew Nembhard really is. And I don't mean that in a negative way, right? One of my favorite players in the NBA is a backup point guard role player, Tyus Jones. I'll reiterate this a ton through the NBA season because one of the teams that I'm going to be watching closely, as I said in the very first episode, is the Orlando Magic. And so there's nothing wrong with being a top tier backup point guard. You can still be one of the 30 best point guards in the league while coming off the bench. Just because you don't start doesn't mean you can't be in that conversation. But it's completely different when you are the man running the show at point guard versus the guy that's just trying to keep the ship afloat off the bench against the second unit. And another guy who's a really good representation of this is like the past versions of Tyler Hero, right? Before last season, Tyler Hero was somebody that when you put him in the starting lineup, you didn't get the same kind of production that you expected from him as a guy who kind of is rooted in scoring the basketball and everything like that. But as soon as he got pulled to the bench and was coming off the bench as part of the second unit again, He was killing folks. And now, he slowly but surely played himself into being a guy who you can rely on in that starting unit with Bam Adebayo and those guys. And he'll be a good player for them when he gets back healthy next to Norman Powell and Andrew Wiggins and, all of them. But he's a guy that once upon a time, despite his talent, tended to look the best when he was killing second units. And when he wasn't, he looked kind of pedestrian. I think that's going to be a lot of what Andrew Nemhart ends up being this season. I don't know if that means that they end up starting Ben Shepherd, but I do think that, I do think that Nemhart is in a certain situation where Rick Carlisle is going to learn a lot about him early, and I think a lot of Indiana Pacers fans are going to learn this soon about Nemhart, that yes, he had himself a really strong postseason the last 2 years. But, you know, winning 16 games versus an 82 game regular season stretch, it's a completely different bear. Yes, the stakes are higher in the postseason, but it's 82 games, different looks, facing all 29 other teams in some capacity throughout the year. It's a completely different animal at the starting point guard position. So I think that they are going to be in an interesting situation with Andrew. I don't think that just because he only played 16 minutes and had 4 points in this game, that is indicative of him being a bad player, as I said before, um, because he isn't. First of all, he just isn't. Um, I think that the injury for him in this game too also is something that's going to be another big hit, because that left shoulder takes away from his ability to knock down the three ball at a high clip. And that's something that made him kind of special too during that postseason run. Going down with that injury, not being able to play the second half, he's someone that I feel like, because he's so impactful on the defensive end as a perimeter defender, that injury, we'll see what all of that means, right? But shout out to Ben Shepherd. Shout out to Ben Shepherd for being able to hold the fort down. Again, another interesting factor of this is if Andrew Nemhart is healthy and plays in the second half, does that impact the game as well? I'm not necessarily sure. Again, I hate bagging on a guy who didn't even get to finish the game, but I do feel like there's going to be real question marks with Andrew Nemhart throughout the entirety of the season. Unfortunately, him getting off to a rocky start, both offensively and in terms of going down with the injury, is two indicators of that. Just for those who think I may be giving him a hard time, when he was on the floor in his 16 minutes, he had 4 points, 4 assists, was 0 of 4, 0 of 5 from the field, and missed both of his 3 point attempts. He finished the game as a -3, and he had 2 fouls and 2 turnovers. Like, I'm not just saying this to try to like kick a man while he's down. I'm saying this because even when he was on the floor in his 16 minutes, he just didn't look right. And now with the shoulder injury, a guy who already had missed all 5 of his field goal attempts now is going to be dealing with something that could hinder his ability to finish through contact. So Andrew Nemhart is going to be a little questionable, I think, especially in the beginning portion of the season. But nonetheless, I want to get to the main point, the main point of this section of the podcast, talking about the Indiana Pacers being that they're fine. They're fine without Tyrese Haliburton right now. Are they going to be championship contenders? No. No. They're going to be good, though. But the Indiana Pacers, man, they as an organization, and a lot of hoop heads will know exactly where I'm going with this, but the Indiana Pacers as an organization, I feel genuinely don't know how to lose. And what I mean by that is this is not a team that knows how to just genuinely tank a season away with the anticipation of trying to get a lottery pick and building up to getting, a blue chip prospect in the top 10 of the NBA draft. Like they don't know how to do that. And I don't mean that in a negative way, genuinely. If you go back to the time of Victor Oladipo taking over the Indiana Pacers, right? This is following the Paul George goes to the Oklahoma City Thunder situation. And a lot of people thought, PG leaves, you no longer have Roy Hibbert, you don't have David West anymore. The ghost of Danny Granger's past is now gone as well. And the team that was battling with LeBron James and the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference semifinals all the time or the Eastern Conference finals all the time for a 2 to 3 year stretch. They just weren't there anymore. And so a lot of people thought, oh, well, the Indiana Pacers are in reset mode. They're going to take a step back. They're not a big market, so they're going to have to build through the draft. They'll have a couple of losing seasons. They'll pick in the top 10, and they'll go kill. And that's the way they'll do it. And instead, with Victor Oladipo as their best player, they were consistently finishing as like a top 4, top 5 seed in the Eastern Conference on a year-to-year basis. And everybody will go back to that year where Victor Oladipo single-handedly, if I put it lightly, Victor Oladipo single-handedly, dog walked the Indiana Pacers through a 7-game series with the Miami Heat, and they dang near won the thing too. Like, he backpacked them into a 7-game series against the big three, the Heatles, Miami Heat, and they nearly won the series. This Indiana Pacers team, regardless of who the coach is, regardless of who the players are, regardless of who the star is any given year, they just know how to win basketball games. This first game indicated to me that Ben Mathurin is going to have himself an most improved player kind of season. It proves to me that Pascal Siakam can be a legitimate number one when you need him to. And it also proves to me that the Indiana Pacers are still going to finish as a top 5, top 6 seed in the Eastern Conference because they have the infrastructure internally to still just be super competitive on a night-to-night basis, and the philosophy of how they play sticks with them even with the fact that Tyrese isn't available. One thing that stood out from last season and clearly translated through the first game of this year is that they're still going to have one of the deepest benches in the NBA. Shout out to Jay Huff, who they got from the Memphis Grizzlies this past summer, and he kind of acts as this buffer at the center position because, Isaiah Jackson, somebody who has a real injury history. They bring in Jay Huff to play backup center. They have Tony Bradley as well as a backup center as well. And those are two guys who just really can eat up space and take up good minutes. And Jay Huff looked good offensively. Don't get me wrong, finished the game with only 5 points, only knocked down 1 3. But if you watch the game, he looks like a guy that okay, wait a minute, he can eat up some center minutes and, be effective on this offense. He looks like somebody who can, fit right in with the way we play fast and in transition. And, he's not a high flyer, but he's a guy who you can trust, on a backdoor cut to finish around the basket. You like that from them. Jarris Walker, like I mentioned beforehand, being able to dust him off and really trust him to play 30 minutes in this game. And mind you, Aaron Nesmith, Ben Shepherd, and Ben Mathurin all fouled out in this game. Now, granted, a handful of those fouls came in, the second overtime, just simply, trying to send guys to the line to kind of extend the game. But still, this Indiana Pacers team is going to be fine. They're going to be more than fine because their offensive philosophy sticks. Their bench depth is going to be top 5 in the league in terms of how productive they are this year. That's just a given. They are a deep basketball team, and Rick Carlisle trusts their bench on a night-to-night basis to honestly play deep into the second and third quarter. He sometimes let that second bench unit rock almost like they're the starters. And number 3, I think that Ben Mathurin is going to absolutely take off. So if you don't have your odds bets placed for most improved player just yet, Ben Mathurin, just saying, might be a guy you want to consider. Bennedict Mathurin is going to be a guy that's going to be really special this year. And I don't think it was a fluke that he had 36 points and 11 rebounds in this first game. I don't think it was a fluke that he got to the free throw line 17 times in this game. The guy plays with grit. The guy plays hard. He's a bruiser. He likes to get to the basket. And I like that. And despite the fact that he took 8 threes, I know as a driver, he's a dangerous finisher around the basket. Bennedict Mathurin is going to be a problem, which is going to make this Indiana Pacers team a problem all year long. Shout out to the Pacers, man, because a lot of people are going to be doubting them all year long. This game, they lost it, but it's a tone setter that sends a message to the rest of the Eastern Conference that, They're not going out sad because they don't have Tyrese. They're going to be solid. And it should strike fear into the East because if they're able to do stuff like this without Tyrese, if they're able to do stuff like this with Andrew Nemhart going down early in this game due to injury, what do they look like when those guys are back?